Hey up! Right, 2 motorcycle reviews in 3 weeks. I normally only do 1 a year. But Royal Enfield were kind enough to invite me to the UK press release of the SCRAM 411, which was a gig that, to be honest, I just couldn't pass up. Now, I've always wondered what goes on at these press events, because this is the first one that I've ever been to. If you're of the same mind and you would like to know what goes on at these press events, let me know in the comments section down below, and I can perhaps put a short video together just explaining what the day was like. Now, to my delight, Royal Enfield's chief designer Mark Wells was present throughout this event and was available throughout the day to answer any questions that we had. It was a bit of a game changer for me as to the direction that this review took, because it became clear to me that Mark is a motorcyclist, a man with a passion for motorcycle travel who just happens to design motorcycles. Now, bear with me, we'll get onto the actual bike in a few moments. You see, I've never been to an event like this before, and I expected the sort of pretentious, we chose this particular shade of blue because it replicates the reflection of the sky on the surface of Lake Como on a late August evening. There was none of that pretension and rubbish. It was, well, we were trying to decide which red we were going to use for this version of the bike, and one of the design team was wearing a pair of red trainers that we really liked, so we matched the bike to that. That to me was priceless. It's the language of a motorcyclist. Stick to what you know and just improve it where you can. Not some smooth, slick marketing grease that looks cool in a brochure. Now, there's a comment that I've heard in recent months countless times. The SCRAM 411 is just a stripped down Himalayan. Nothing particularly interesting about that. And you know what? We heard exactly the same comments about the Continental GT and the Interceptor 650. Same chassis, same engine, mainly the same running gear, but 2 completely different bikes, 2 completely different experiences. Now, I'll be the first to admit it, I've avoided the Himalayan like the plague. It appeared on the market about, 6 years ago, just as I was coming off 15 years of adventure bikes and going over to modern classics. As a motorcyclist, it was a time of rediscovery for me. I'd spent around 35 years riding big, overpowered motorcycles, and I was extremely dissatisfied. Something was missing from my motorcycle experience, and to me, at the time, a 400cc adventure tourer wasn't going to scratch that itch that had been bothering me for so many years. That epiphany was yet to come, and I think the eureka moment actually occurred when I first got my hands on an Interceptor. Now, over the years, the Himalayan has become a very respected adventure tourer. A modestly powered workhorse that will get you and has got people around the world. It was Royal Enfield's first brand new from the ground up motorcycle in decades, with a chassis designed by Harris Performance and a brand new 400cc or 410cc single cylinder engine. Mark Wells was keen to point out that where the Himalayan was concerned, it still had to have elements of the world famous bullet in its DNA. It had to be a modestly powered motorcycle that was easy to work on and cheap to run. It had to be a single cylinder bike, but it also had to be a capable, comfortable, relaxed tourer. People have been travelling over the Himalayas on bullets for decades, and Royal Enfield wanted to provide for its customers a bike that could not only do that, but do it better, and they succeeded. The Himalayan went through its first major facelift a couple of years ago, and it's proved to be an enormously successful bike. But the Himalayan is a single-minded tool bike that doesn't appeal to everyone. Enter the SCRAM 411. The first, second, third, and probably even the 4th generation of bikers are dying out. To survive, the motorcycle industry needs to attract young riders. Young riders have certain constraints, the biggest one being finances, and that can manifest itself in several different ways if a young person is looking to buy a motorcycle. For a start, he or she are not going to be looking for a bike that costs the equivalent of a 1980s semi-detached 3-bedroom house. It has to be affordable. That person also doesn't want to be shelling out half the cost of the bike for insurance, so real-world performance should be adequate but not over the top, so the bike will fit into the lower insurance categories. It's got to be easy to maintain and cheap to run, and the SCRAM 411 ticks all those boxes. It also has heritage. It's built by a firm that has the longest history of motorcycle building in the world. Add to that a big dollop of street cred, and I think Royal Enfield may well have a winner. Or should I say, another winner. Yes, this bike shares the same chassis and the same engine as the Himalayan, along with a lot of other components. But Mark Wells and his team have skillfully crafted a very different bike by giving it a complete set of new clothes and adjusting the geometry of the bike slightly by swapping the skinny 21-inch front wheel for a fatter 19-inch wheel. I've not actually ridden a Himalayan, so I can't compare the bikes directly, although that is something that I'm hoping to remedy in the next few weeks. The first thing that struck me for this bike while we were waiting to go for the first ride, and we were riding most of the day, was that it seemed very tall. Now, I think part of this was an optical illusion because the bike had been parked up on an incline, and I sort of climbed onto it from low ground. It seemed bigger than it actually is. But once I got on board, I was pleasantly surprised. Even with my relatively average 32 inside leg, I was easily able to flat foot it. By contrast, the classic 350 that I recently added to the channel, I have to lift my heels up off the ground slightly. Now, it's not just the seat height, I think it's partly down to the way that Royal Enfield have sculpted the seat to allow the rider to use more of that inside leg for that reach down to the ground. The seat has been completely redesigned for the SCRAM 411, and as I've come to expect from Royal Enfield now, it's a very comfortable one. I'm not sure how many miles we covered during the course of the day, but Royal Enfield were very keen to keep us in the saddle for as long as they possibly could, to experience and fully digest what the bike was all about. They did allow us numerous but very brief stops, which probably helped, but I didn't feel any discomfort until right at the end of the day, and even then, it was literally just a slight discomfort, no pain. Now, those slight modifications that Royal Enfield have made to create this bike have turned what was an adventure tourer into an urban street scrambler. I'm sure it's still a very capable off-road machine, but that 19-inch front wheel now gives it a more capable on-road performance, with feel through the handlebars giving a very positive feedback from the road. The suspension setup is on the firm side. It's not set up for comfort, although the comfort side of it wasn't bad. It's geared up more for coping with poor road surfaces, and it easily swallows potholes and ruts without bottoming out. I'll get onto this bike's urban agility in just a moment, but there's a lot more to the SCRAM than that. This is a great backroad scratcher with fun but predictable handling characteristics that provide immense pleasure during those twists and turns, with the suspension that takes care of the ruts without the bike getting in any way upset along the way. The roads that Royal Enfield took us on were clearly selected specifically to challenge these bikes and show us riders what they were capable of. For the most part, not the best road surfaces in the world, and sometimes downright abysmal, but the SCRAM that I was riding never lost its composure once. The dual-purpose Seat tyres seemed very capable, and I did specifically test for this because people are always commenting about it. They showed no tendency to tramline or track on road markings or repair seams on the roads. Nobody wants a bike that does strange, unpredictable things in certain circumstances. And the SCRAM 411 is a very capable all-round package that doesn't seem to have any nasty surprises no matter what you throw at it. Now, I don't like riding in groups at the best of times, because in order to go with the flow, for want of a better word, you often find yourself having to work the bike harder and brake harder than you would normally find yourself doing. I found the brakes perfectly adequate. They never struck me as being underpowered in any way. But then again, as you know, I've always been an advocate of looking well ahead and reacting early rather than leaving it till the last minute and hoping that the brakes will do the job for me. But I'm confident they'll do the job in an emergency. The bike is a pleasure to ride in an urban environment. The clutch is quite light. Fueling, as usual with Royal Enfield, is perfect, with throttle opening at low speeds and shutting off being drama free. Again, no nasty surprises that can catch people out. The gearbox, as usual with Royal Enfields, is also excellent. Royal Enfield told us that they had altered the gear ratios slightly to take into account the smaller wheels, but other than that, engine and gearbox are the same as the Himalayan. I experienced smooth and predictable gear engagement all day with no false neutral. On the twists and turns of the narrow back streets of Brighton, the bike acquitted itself handling wise just as well as it had out on the open road. I found the weight of the bike very manageable, and it felt just as nimble and flickable at low speeds as it had done out on the A and B roads. There were a lot of traffic lights and pedestrian crossings, which meant a lot of stopping and starting. Modern air oil-cooled engines often struggle in this environment and start to overheat. From my perspective, there was no evidence of this with the SCRAM. The engine behaved itself throughout and there was no obvious excessive heat radiating from the engine. Now, before we get on to styling and general fit and finish, I suppose we ought to talk about that engine. 410cc's, total power output of just over 24 bhp. In the greater scheme of motorcycling, that's not a lot. But from my perspective, it's enough. It's enough certainly for the novice, and I think it'll be enough for the more intelligent rider that realises that the days of high-powered, high-speed motorcycles are coming to an end. In the 274-mile journey from my home to the venue for this press event, I counted roughly 100 speed cameras, including the multiple speed cameras that are set up for the average speed zones. I did this same journey about 23 years ago and counted one. In fact, it was the first time I'd ever seen a speed camera. Now, I think I covered about 120 miles actually on motorways or dual carriageways. And easily on those motorways, what with variable speed zones, etc., the average speed that we were able to travel was between 40 and 60 miles an hour. And for the most part, to be honest, I struggle even to attain those speeds for at least 60 miles of that 120 miles of motorway work. So realistically, I think the argument for having a fast bike is rapidly becoming irrelevant, and it's only going to become more irrelevant as the years roll on. What I'm trying to say is things are changing, and motorcycles like the SCRAM, sort of mid-size, or at least what used to be called mid-size motorcycles with a modest power output and top speed, are predominantly going to become the bikes of the future. Over the years, I'd heard that the Himalayan single-cylinder engine was quite vibey, and I was surprised to learn actually it's very smooth. You get a slight but not unpleasant buzz through the foot pegs here and there, but largely, and for the most part, it reminds me of the very civilised engine of the new 350s from Royal Enfield. I certainly don't envisage that over distance this is going to become tiring or uncomfortable. The bike can be hustled up to 50 miles an hour very quickly, and then power and acceleration do start to trail off a little. Most notably between sort of 60 and 70 miles an hour. I only got it up to 70 miles an hour on a dual carriageway on one occasion, but it got there without any drama, and I did feel like there was a little bit left if I wanted to go any faster. There is, as you can see, no screen or other type of wind protection, so if that's a problem for you, the best advice I can give you is the advice I always give people: if you don't like the wind, don't buy a motorcycle, get a car. To my eye, there's no doubt about it, the SCRAM 411 has a cool, muscular presence that the Himalayan simply doesn't possess. But as I said, the Himalayan is a tool bike. The SCRAM 411 is designed to appeal to the younger rider. Having said that, Royal Enfield have taken a safe approach to the restyling of what was the Himalayan. You can't please everyone all of the time. Some are going to like it, some are going to be lukewarm, and some are going to hate it. But I think the conservative approach to restyling is enough to entice the youngsters while still remaining desirable for gentlemen of a certain age like myself. Royal Enfield is a brand that lives on its heritage, with the Himalayan formerly being the odd man out in a lineup of products which were very clearly based on machines of a bygone era. I've worried for some time that this could end up making Royal Enfield a bit of a one-trick pony. Modern classic motorcycles have risen in popularity over the last few years, but there's no guarantee that's going to last forever. Although Royal Enfield has taken the safe approach with this restyling, I personally think it's been a success. It's made it very clear that Royal Enfield is very capable of providing an up-to-date product of modern design that can stand on its own 2 feet, or should I say 2 wheels. Fit and finish is good all round. The paintwork is about what you would expect for a £4,500 bike. It's very good, but doesn't quite reach the point of being premium. The instruments are the same that we've seen fitted to the Meteor 350. Feature rich, and of course this particular bike had the tripper. I presume that's standard for this model range. The switchgear is the same switchgear that we see on the 650 Twins and the outgoing Bullet and Classic models. And then there's the chassis. Ever since Harris Performance got involved with the design of Royal Enfields, they've taken on a very distinctive look. And I almost feel that if you removed all reference to Royal Enfield from these bikes, you would still know, or at least suspect, that it was a Royal Enfield. The relationship between the seat, the foot pegs and the handlebars isn't extreme, but obviously, being a scrambler-based machine, the foot pegs are a little bit higher than you'll get on a normal road bike. So are the handlebars. But I think Ari have come up with a good compromise here. They're not extreme enough to cause discomfort, although I'm sure there are some very tall people that'll complain. And in a standing position, it works really well. Even at reasonably high speeds, the bike felt very stable, with no compromise in the control of the machine. This is a very well balanced bike. Now, one last thing on the subject of styling before I sum this bike up. The cowling that covers the headlamp and houses the instrument binnacle. I'd assumed this was plastic, but Mark Wells explained that it's actually cast aluminium. And the design team incorporated this onto the SCRAM as a homage to the Bullet. A modern reinterpretation to what was known by Royal Enfield back in the day as the casket, a trademark part of the machine that is recognisable, I think, to everyone who has a love and knowledge of old motorcycles. Personally, I love that kind of backstory to the design of a part on a motorcycle. It's probably going to mean more to the Royal Enfield itself than it will to your average customer, but it's a very pleasant and poignant nod to what is, after all, the longest running production motorcycle in the world. So, to sum the SCRAM 411 up, as I said earlier, Royal Enfield have made it very clear that this is a bike aimed at the younger generation to pull newcomers into motorcycling, and I applaud that. But I don't think that that is the pigeonhole that this bike should be inserted into. I thoroughly enjoyed my day out on this bike, and I struggled to pick fault with it anywhere. In fact, I've asked Royal Enfield if I can borrow one for a week. They've agreed, and it's coming this week, because it all just seemed a little bit too good to be true. I've always quite liked the look of scramblers, but I have zero off-road ability, so for me this would just be a styling choice. And personally, I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, look at the amount of people that drive around in Range Rovers, and the closest that they'll get to going off-road with it is parking on a grass verge. The thing is, what a lot of people don't realise is that a dual-purpose motorcycle that's well sorted is a formidable machine in the handling department, and the SCRAM 411 is well sorted. It's pitched as an urban commuter that will also serve you for a weekend getaway. I'm not going to argue with that. This bike will do just about anything. Commuting, popping to the shops, a blast out to the coast, but Royal Enfield are also working out some luggage for this bike, so I do believe it will also be a competent little tourer. Now, I know that once I've said that, people will jump into the comment section and say, oh, you know, that 400, that's no good for touring, it's too slow, I need to do 80 or 90 miles an hour on the motorway or the highway or freeway or whatever. Now, fair enough, if that's what you honestly believe you need, there's no need to tell me about it. You're entitled to that viewpoint and I respect it, but it's clear to me that the art of riding a small motorcycle has been lost. I used to do 1200 mile and more tours, 2 up on a 125 carrying camping equipment, and 95% of the time I was able to ride with the flow of traffic without any problems keeping up, and I was well practiced in the art of slipping in behind HGVs travelling at 60 miles an hour, dropping back until I hit the backdraft from their slipstream, which would then tow me and the bike in a wind-free zone for mile after mile after mile, halving my fuel consumption. I used to love doing that. There is an art to riding a small motorcycle long distances, and I suppose you've either got it or you haven't got it. Right, once again, thank you so much for watching this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you would leave a like, and if you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to this channel. It helps me out and I would be grateful. I will of course be back on Friday, so until then, please ride safely and I'll see you soon.